Mine says live on YouTube.
Yeah, so thank you. I can confirm we're now live on YouTube, councillors. So for this meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, for the benefit of the public, I'm James Edmonds. I'm Democratic Services Assistant Manager at Northamptonshire County Council, and I'm opening the meeting because in the absence of the chair, it will be necessary for the committee to appoint one of the three vice chairs, who are Councillor Hakewill, Councillor Stamborough and Councillor Perry, to chair the current meeting. So if I could invite the committee to nominate one of the vice chairs and to take the chair for the current meeting. And I have Councillor Stamborough indicating.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Hakewill to chair this meeting, please.
Okay, and is that seconded? Councillor Perry, you were indicating?
It is.
Okay, are there any other nominations? I'm seeing none, so in which case Councillor Hakewill is appointed to take the chair for the current meeting.
Thank you, James, and thank you, colleagues. We look forward to chairing this, which is in fact the last meeting of Overview and Scrutiny. First item on the agenda is apologies for non-attendance. James.
I've received none, Chair, although, as I say, the Councillor Scrimshaw, the committee chair, is absent.
And on that point, I'd just like to make the very strong point of how appreciative we all are, and I'm very happy if colleagues want to make that point too at this moment, being the last meeting, of the input and dedication over quite a number of years of Councillor Mick Scrimshaw. He's not with us today, but he has put enormous effort in, as have in fact many other people over the lifetime of the County Council. But especially to Mick, and to wish him well. And just through that, James, if any members are showing to speak who might like to add to that commendation for his work and effort on Overview and Scrutiny and Council in general.
Yeah, Councillor Stamborough and Councillor Perry have hands up, unless they're the same hands left up, and also Councillor Birch.
Okay, so if we go Councillor Perry, Councillor Stamborough and Councillor Birch.
Okay, I do apologise for background noise. So I think what I can say about Mick is that he's taught me a lot over the last 4 years on the council about scrutiny. And in my time, for those that know me, I can be very passionate, quite vocal, over exuberant. Mr. McCardle will be having a wry smile at that. But Mick was always there to encourage me to say my piece, but also to manage my expectations and make sure that the contribution was always constructive and appropriate. And I can say it really has been a privilege to work with him and call him a colleague, a friend and a confidant on the council. One of the true gentlemen that does the job for the right reason. He's still trying to convince me to go to the dark side. And he said he'll never give up. But at the moment, I'm still true blue, but hugely respectful of Councillor Scrimshaw and his contribution to the role.
Thank you, Councillor Perry. Councillor Stamborough.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, I echo everything that's been said so far, and I did get to say some things at full council, but just two things. Firstly, to thank Mick Scrimshaw personally for the counsel and advice and good guidance he's given me in my time on the Scrutiny Committee when we were briefly chair and vice chair, and then when the new setup came in, we were briefly chair and vice chair of Finance Scrutiny, and then when the new setup came in and we had a chair and 3 vice chairs. It's been an experience and I've enjoyed every moment of it. And can I suggest that it would be a good idea, James, if we recorded Councillor Scrimshaw's apologies in the minutes for this meeting? I'm sure he meant to send them, and I think it would be good if we did. Thank you.
Understood.
Thank you, Councillor Stanborough. And Councillor Birch, Jane.
Thank you. Well, Mick's a close colleague, and he has mentored me in some sense, and I have been hugely grateful for that, because his knowledge and his experience and the way of cutting through the most difficult, complex issues has always been an absolute joy. He's one in a million, and I think the present financial situation of the County Council is due in no small part to Mick's leadership of this group. I don't think the achievements would have been made if it hadn't been, I mean, I'm saying this, there may be other people out there, but in my view, Mick has done the sort of job that has been almost impossible to do, to bring people from different political persuasions together to work for a common cause, to work positively, constructively in the good of the council and our residents, to ensure we have best value, that we are transparent and we are accessible. So, you know, whatever happens in the new authorities, I hope Mick's work, Mick's way of working and Mick's reach to both councillors and the public is remembered, because he's an example. He's set a high bar for other people to follow, but you know, he has been hugely instrumental in the way that he worked with this scrutiny committee in bringing us to where we are, you know, budget balance and the rest of it, you know, safe and legal as we move to a west and a north. You know, Mick has played his part in that. So, you know, thank you, Mick, for being such a brilliant chair of scrutiny. And this is the last meeting. You know, this is something that we've all got to be very proud of. I mean, I'm hugely privileged to have been working with him. Thank you.
Thank you, Jane, Chris and Victoria. That will be on the record for the future, and what a befitting on the record for Mick to be able to watch. Before we move on to notification of requests, I would just like to go around the screen as I see it and just have everybody very briefly, no more than 10 minutes, just introduce who they are. So as I look at my screen, that will start with James Edmonds.
Thank you, Chair. As I say, I'm James Edmonds, Democratic Services Assistant Manager at Northamptonshire County Council, and member of the team who's principally supported the overview and scrutiny function.
Thank you, James. Cecile.
Thank you. I'm Cecile Having-Swift, the councillor for the Brixworth division, and I have been sitting on the scrutiny committee for the last 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Cecile. Jill.
Councillor Jill Mercer. I'm the councillor for the Finding division, and likewise have been on scrutiny for quite a few years before this new setup came in as well.
Thank you. Chris Stanborough.
Chris Stanborough, County Councillor for Oakley Division in Corby, and one of the 3 Vice Chairs of Scrutiny.
And Raj.
Raj Sohal, Democracy Officer at Northamptonshire County Council, and I've supported the Overview and Scrutiny Committee since March 2020.
Thank you. Graham.
Chairman, Councillor Graham Lawman, Councillor for Croyland and Swanspool Division in Wellingborough, and also currently the Chairman of the County Council for a few days.
Thank you. Victoria.
Victoria Perry, Councillor for Eyes Division in Kettering, Vice Chair of Scrutiny, and I've been on Scrutiny for 4 years.
Thank you. Barry.
Barry Scott, I'm Executive Director of Finance and Deputy Chief Executive for Northamptonshire County Council.
Jane.
I'm Jane Birch. I'm the County Councillor for Kingsthorpe South Division in Northampton. I've been on Overview and Scrutiny since 2018.
Thank you. Chris Smith-Haynes.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Chris Smith-Haynes, County Councillor for Burton and Broughton Division. I've been on scrutiny since I was first elected to County Council in 2017.
Thank you. Tony.
Tony McArdle, Lead Commissioner on behalf of MHCLG.
And it's it's Sonia, is it? Have I got that right? Sonia.
It's Sophia.
Sophia. Sorry.
That's okay. My name is Sophia Narty. I'm the Deputy Monitoring Officer for Northamptonshire County Council, and I'm providing legal support to the committee, and I have done for about 15 months now.
Thank you. Rebecca.
Rebecca Breeze, County Councillor for Middleton Cheney Division, and I've been on scrutiny just for a couple of years.
Malcolm.
Yes, good morning.
Thank you, Chair.
Malcolm Longley.
Malcolm.
Apologies.
Malcolm Longley, I do apologise.
Sorry, you're right. Tis me, Jim, is it? Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, with Malcolm Longley, I'm the member for Crick and Braunston and the portfolio holder for finance for NCC.
Thank you, Malcolm. Matt.
Thank you, Chair. Matt Golby, leader of the council, Northamptonshire County Council. I'm very keen and interested to attract where the journey that Scrutiny has been on. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Malcolm, I'm sorry about that. I got 2 Chris's and missed out on 2 Malcolms. Malcolm Waters.
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Malcolm Waters from Wellingborough Hatton Division. Yes, I've served on the County Council now for many, many years, over 20 years. And been on this committee from day one. Thank you.
Michael.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Michael Clark. I'm the County Councillor for the Hackleton and Grange Park Division and have been for the past 12 years. I've had a rather checkered career, moving in and out of scrutiny, and had a period in the Cabinet on highways, more recently preceded Malcolm on finance, and have thoroughly enjoyed the last 2 to 3 years back on finance scrutiny.
Thank you, Michael. I think Jane disappeared and came back. Simon Deacon.
I'm Simon Deacon, Deputy Chief of Staff to the Northamptonshire Commissioners.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I always think that we know each other pretty much, but the community who will watch this in perpetuity, I suppose, don't. So thank you very much for everyone introducing. So we've looked at apologies for non-attendance, and item number 2 is notification of requests from members of the public to speak. Do we have any formal notifications, James?
We haven't had any members of the public who've requested to address the committee chair. I did receive some comments from Mrs. Jean Lineker, a member of the public, which I've circulated by email to committee members. Principally, Mrs. Lineker wanted to thank the committee for its work and also thank the committee for listening to comments and concerns that she's raised when she's addressed the committee at previous meetings. So as I say, I've circulated that her email on to committee members.
Thank you, James. And committee members would have received Jean's message. And I'd just like to say that she has been almost constant contributor to scrutiny when in effect she didn't need to be, but she did it because she cared in that way. So thank you to Jean, and I'm sure one of the lessons to learn for the future is how in all councils we engage the community more deeply than sometimes the system allows us to do. Now I've got Victoria Perry.
Hi, thank you, Chair. Yeah, she also wanted to extend her thanks to Democratic Support because they've always enabled her to attend the meetings, looked after her and made her feel very welcome. So James wasn't going to say that about himself, so I'm going to say it. And likewise, she really has come in and challenged us and held us to account, and I'm absolutely certain that she will continue to do so.
Thank you, Victoria, and that obviously transfers across to a number of Democratic Services colleagues. And I certainly remember from the time when I joined, and obviously I'm Jim Hakel, Rothwell Morsley in 2013, Jean was very regularly coming to scrutiny and along with others, very much welcome to do so. So we therefore have carried out item number 2. Item number 3 is declaration of members' interests. and this will be the last time I say it as chairman of a meeting. I think we all know what the declaration means. Are there any declarations, and should they turn up during the debate, please declare it, that are not on the County Council website. Declarations of interest, members. A resounding silence, so no declarations from that point of view. So welcome to this particular meeting. We've introduced ourselves. Second item on my briefing is that Tony McArdle is here and attending, and would like to speak briefly at the start. Well, we're at 10:18, so we're not too far off the start. Tony, I'm seeking you out on the screen.
I believe, sorry.
Yeah, sorry, James. Just to say, Tony had to leave and send apologies. He had to go to another meeting at 10:15.
Ah, okay. So the obvious thing, and perhaps say it at the end, is to thank members for all their work. And I think we've seen those thanks move through, both from full council and today. The raise hand function is available. Colleagues are already using that, so thank you for that. Item number 5 is the minutes of the overview and scrutiny meeting on the 25th of November. Review those minutes of the previous meeting. Are there any comments on those particular minutes of that meeting? I can go through those. It's agenda item number 5. If there are no comments or no items arising, shall we just do that in one and accept it as agreed? If someone would like just to move it. Moved by Councillor Stanborough and seconded by Councillor Smith-Haynes. Thank you both for expediting that particular item. Item number 6 is delivery of the 2021 council budget. So that's our current council year, of which we're about to enter the 12th and last month, and the 12th and last month of a county council budget. We have in our papers that have been given to us all of those budget items from the last cabinet meeting. I've got James down here to just introduce that particular item. So I'll hand over to James.
Very much not, Chair. You have elected members and officers far more expert than I on this matter.
It was really to make sure there was nothing else you wish to contribute. So members, we therefore have the papers on hand. Contributions in relation to the budget.
Sorry, Chairman. You obviously do have the cabinet member for finance and the executive director present. So I think it would be very appropriate if you gave them the opportunity if they wish to make any opening comments.
And from my point of view, I'll try and look at the right column on my screen. So apologies. Barry Scarr. Now I'm there, Barry. You almost thought you lost your chance there. Sorry for that. So we've got Barry Scarr and Councillor Malcolm Longley. Which of the two of you wants to lead off on delivery of the 2021 council budget? Okay, I'll choose Malcolm Longley as the elected member. Would you like to introduce?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I'm not going to take too long because the credit here, because I think it's a good result, lies primarily with Barry and the team. They've been absolutely stunning as far as I'm concerned, and made my life so easy. They really are a great team. So Barry, I'm going to embarrass you on that regard, and but it needs to be said. I'm going to let Barry talk the detail because he's got it absolutely at his fingertips. But the key issue is, in any budget, there's what I always call a three-legged stool, and the three legs of this are the revenue account, the borrowings, and the reserves. These are the three key things you've got to get, in my view, you've got to get right. And the revenue account, it started 3 years ago, was very tricky, as we all know. And the first year was when really the tough bit took place, and Mike Clark would be very much part of that. Mike, you can recall it well. I'm quite sure that you had the tough bit. Second year was one of consolidation, and the third year was, well, dare I say, much easier. And in each year there was a positive situation. Reserves have gone up year on year. You'll see the results, and Barry sort of presents them. And so reserves have gone up and borrowings have gone down year on year. So three-legged stool. It's a great result from where we were. Still loads of things to do. It's a darn shame we haven't got another 4 years, because I think we'd really do big things. So that's it, Chair. I think that's I'll let Barry bathe in his glory.
That's lovely. Thank you very much, Malcolm, and thank you for everything you've done these past years to bring things forward to the current position. So Barry, if you like to present there, one of the things that we did want to focus on was use of capital receipts, and that aspect I know can move into some slightly more confidential aspect, but I think the committee, when we had a pre-briefing, were interested to feel comfortable about the capital receipts coming in and being achieved for revenue and other purposes. But do carry on, and I'm sure members will have questions to ask. So Barry.
Thank you, Chair. The report in front of you gives an overspend of around about £17 million. Sorry, an underspend of £17 million. And that's broken up into two parts. There's a separate reserved part, which is the impact of government discounts on business rates, in which we get Section 31 going forward, which is around 8.8 million. And also a business as usual underspend around about 8 million as well, which feeds into that 17 million total figure.
I do apologise, Barry, but and I'm not sure if I'm the only one. It is you are quite quiet.
Right. Well, I've also got a set. Is that better, Chair? I've got a set of building works outside as well, which isn't helping.
Yes, that's much better if it's not too inconvenient to hold the microphone.
So as I said, there's two separate parts to it. The business rates, members will remember that when COVID broke out last year, the government gave out a whole series of discounts to businesses on business rates, which meant that effectively the districts and boroughs weren't collecting those rates, but we did get Section 31 grant to compensate for that. That will be accounted for in next year's collection fund, and you will have seen that coming through both West and Northland's budgets. But what that means is that we get 8.8 million of that Section 31 grant, but we've got to set it aside to pass through to the two new unitaries for next year. So on top of that, as I said, the business as usual underspend of around about 8 million, which is the set out in the report and gives a service by service DRO. And also that's split between business as usual and COVID funding. So that also tells you how we've allocated and apportioned the government's COVID funding. And at the moment, we're expecting to carry around about 15 billion of that funding forward into the two new unitary councils to help them deal with the pandemic as well. In terms of capital receipts,
I'm struggling to hear. I don't know about other members. It's
yes, Barry. It's sort of fading away quite badly.
I'll try. Give me a second, Jim.
Yes, no problem. Just as Barry tries to sort that, was everyone having a similar difficulty? Yeah. With Zoom meetings, you never know whether it's oneself or everybody else.
Chairman, while we're waiting, could I just back on the minutes? I just realised my apologies were not recorded in the last meeting.
I think we can certainly now retrospectively show your apologies, because I'm not sure who's going to contest that in the future. No problem.
Is that better, Chair?
Massively.
Right, okay, I've shut the windows to block out the noise that's coming in from outside.
Barry, that's so much better, thank you.
So as I said, two elements to be underspent, a business as usual above 8 million and the COVID Section 31 grants for business rates of 8.8 million as well. In terms of capital receipts, I've given you a separate paper on that, and I've set out what I think are the list of certainty capital receipts that we're going to get. I've kept them anonymous because we're still in commercial dialogue, but my view is that of those receipts that I've listed out, I'm over 95% certain that they will arrive by 31st of March. There are other receipts which are in play, which I have less certainty about. But what that shows is that the ones that I'm entirely certain about are enough to fund our flexible use of capital receipts for 2020-21. So we will have enough to cover off our 13.4 million requirement. However, what I will say is that this year is slightly different to previous years in that the imperative has been to get those capital receipts in at the year end every year, certainly in the last 3 years. But because we've got an 8 million underspend on the general fund, the actual scrabbling about and the urgency about that is less, because technically, even if those receipts didn't come in by the year end, we would have enough coverage in revenue to cover off the transformation funding. And it's a long time since the council's been in that position. But as it stands, there are a number of receipts that will come in by the end of the year. But and I know that it's a bit wafer thin given the figures. But there are other receipts out there in the background as well that have a sort of a less certain delivery that we also might get in by the year end. I'm happy to take any questions on either report, Chair, either the revenue monitoring, the appendices, or the capital receipts report.
How many times do we say we're mooted? Barry, thank you very much for that. Colleagues, I've got no questions coming forward. Now I have. So that was Chris Stamborough, followed by Councillor Michael Clark.
Thank you very much, and thanks, Barry, for that. I've got a few questions. Firstly, on the capital receipts item, from the briefing note you've sent to us, clearly the one that will make or break the projection there, and I take it into account your 95% certainty on them, is the receipt for land of £5 million. Are there, is there, you've outlined about the underspend on the general fund, and therefore, in theory, it's not so much, we're not scrabbling around, it's less of a concern than it might have been in the past. So 95% certain of getting that money in. Is there a date forecast for that receipt? And what mitigations other than, and I've heard the general fund thing, do you have any other mitigations in mind if for some reason that doesn't come in?
Tread very carefully here, Chair, because I don't want to tilt us into a closed session by discussing details. But this is the reason I'm so confident on that one in particular, Councillor Stamborough, is it's because it's an option to sell a land that's part of a much bigger deal brought forward. And it's not an individual sale in itself, it's an activation of an existing clause, which we've managed to wring better value out of. So that's why I'm very, very confident that that's going to come in March. So
would it be fair to say that we're in control there because we can exercise the option to sell the land?
That's right.
Thank you. Okay. Can I just ask about a few other things if I can? So at full council recently, we were told that the likely outturn in terms of general balances and earmarked reserves is going to be around £95 million, and you've alluded to £70 million as being the sort of the current position in the report. What items constitute the difference between the 70 and the 95 million? I'll give you the other questions because I'm sure I'll be able to deal with them pretty quickly. There's a line in the most recent report from commissioners which was published on the 1st of December, most recent letter to the Minister, which reads, given the issues identified to date, we anticipate that the accounts, and that's the accounts to 1819, will require modification with regard to minimum revenue provision and private finance initiative schemes. This is disappointing, and we continue to work with the council to make further improvements to financial processes. I appreciate that's quite historic, given the letter was written in September. It's the use of the word disappointing that slightly bothers me, which would imply possibly some adverse effects on the council. And I know I've asked about this recently, and I've previously and got the impression there wasn't going to be an adverse effect, but whether there's any further comment you can make about that would really help. And the final one that bothers me slightly in the monthly finance report, there are a number of places where accruals are referred to, and the report talks about accruals either not materialising or being overdone in some way. I appreciate accruals are an art, not a science, but the fact that there are several which were more than they could have been, was that unavoidable, or are any lessons that can be learned from that process, please? Thank you, Chair.
Through you, Chair, that's quite a few questions in the one paragraph there. In terms of reserves, in the main, the difference is government COVID funding in relation to contained outbreak management and test and trace. And the reason why that hasn't been included in the period 9, but has been included in later ones, is that we haven't had a confirmation from the government until now that that could actually be carried forward. So how I treat that was dependent upon that government decision, because clearly if it was grant repayable, I would have to put it in the balance sheet as a creditor. Whereas if I could carry it forward, it would be a reserve that would be carried forward into the 2 new unitaries. We have had confirmation recently that it can be carried forward. Therefore, around about 16 million of that will be carried forward into the 2 new unitary councils. The remaining balance is actually the contingencies within Northamptonshire County Council. Although we mention them in the revenue report, we don't report them as an underspend, but there's 4 million in contingencies that hasn't been touched by the County Council that will also be carried forward in reserves into 2021-22 for the 2 new unitary councils. And that makes up the majority of the difference that you referred to there, Councillor Steinberg. In terms of 18-19, I don't want to do, I'll have to do a spoiler alert, because obviously we still plan to take the accounts to March Audit Committee, and I know a few members of Scrutiny are on Audit Committee as well. There are a number of items that will need to be adjusted, and in the main they will be on the balance sheet rather than the revenue impact. There will be some minor revenue impact, but we're still negotiating that with EY at the moment in terms of the final restatement of the accounts. In any other council, these would be immaterial, because the materiality levels of a council with a net budget of almost £500 million are quite high, but because of our risk profile, we've got very low materiality levels, which has haunted us during this whole audit. So we might see some minor adjustments in the revenue balance, but it's not hugely material in terms of the council's reserves or net budget. But because that's still being negotiated with EY, you will see the results of that hopefully at the March Audit Committee when we present the revised accounts. Accruals, Councillor Stanborough, it is and the recent reviews into council accounts and audits have revealed this. The push to have closures ever earlier, especially May, means that a lot of estimates are applied to accruals by all councils, not just this council, which means that you will not always have 100% accuracy on this, whereas in the past when accounts had to be closed by June and September, you could have a lot more time to see what was coming through and make a better analysis of accruals. So I think one of the recommendations that's coming out of the recent reviews is that actually that deadline pushed out again, because it's making the accuracy of accounts and the audit of accounts that much more harder by putting these estimated accruals in. Again, I would say that the accrual impact isn't material, and even if you get it wrong by a couple of £100,000 on a net budget of £500 million, it does make a huge amount of difference, and normally you would skip over that. But again, because our materiality levels are so low, the auditors are picking this up. But it is a function of the drive to have an earlier closure of accounts rather than any misfunction of the finance systems within the county council.
Can I just come back on that final point, Chair, please? Because I think that's quite an important point, and I would absolutely support what you're saying there. It's always appeared to me ridiculous that government has driven a shorter and shorter close down and outturn period for councils. If you're running a public company with a £500 million turnover, you'd get 10 months to produce your accounts, to Companies House. Yes, you may have to make earlier announcements to the stock exchange and the like, but you get some leeway. Let's put it that way, which councils like ours just aren't getting. And the consequence of that is that what happens is if accruals are overestimated, that means that it reduces the outturn surplus if there is one, or increases the deficit if there is one, and then you're into, well, how are we going to recover that? Well, we'll cut services, or we'll use reserves, or we'll raise council tax. It may be not material in terms of the county council's accounts, but is material perhaps in terms of a service that could have been provided, which isn't provided anymore because our accruals are out by a figure of £200,000 to £300,000. So I would absolutely support the point that you make about councils need to be given longer. Thanks, Chair, for allowing me to rant on that point.
I don't believe any of us feel it's a rant. Now, Michael, Malcolm did show after you, and I wondered, Malcolm, is that on this particular point? And with your forbearance, Michael?
Yes, Jim, very much so, yes. Excuse me, Mike. Yeah, I was interested in pointing out that, and Chris and Mick will know this, I would hope. For the first period that we were dealing with the budget, or I was dealing with it following Michael, then we used to have a monthly meeting, and it worked very well. So we gave as much information to Chris and Mick as possible, and looked for ideas, and they were very, very helpful. Went very well. So they're both part of this. But anybody that was observing this over the last 3 years will have noticed, if you look closely, that at the beginning of the year, we'd put one forecast out, and from that point in time, it got better every month, till in the end, at the end of the year, we showed a positive. Now, every one of these years, including this year, then we've done the same strategy, so that it's never gone backwards, it's always gone a little bit better each month. And that's one of the reasons why Barry can say, at one point he has a forecast for the year end in period 9, but period 12, if you follow history, you'll know period 12 is going to be a lot better than period 9, because that's been the approach we've had. It's very easy for me to deliver a result when it's getting a little bit better. Far more difficult if it's going the wrong way. So that's why we've taken that approach over these last 3 years. So you will see the year end getting better progressively, and we're in the last one. I hope I don't fall at the last fence, but that's where we stand at the moment, and that's why. And that's the answer. One of the answers, Chris, to your question. But I'd like to thank you and Mick for your support over the years. Shame we couldn't do it this last year. Thank you, Chair.
Malcolm, thank you. I'm sure you won't fall at the last fence. James, that is perhaps one of the points, that meeting that Malcolm mentioned is one of the good factors of scrutiny, and maybe we should pass that on to North and West. Michael, you've been very mindful of having to wait. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Really following on from the comments made by Malcolm, 3 years ago, if we had suggested, I think in February 2018, that in February 2021, this council would be producing a surplus on its revenue account of 7 million or 16 million with the funding side, and putting 90 million in reserves, you'd have said you're living in cloud cuckoo land. Now, I was part of this journey of recovery after all the changes and the 114 notice under Mr. McLaughlin in February 2018. But I'd really like to invite Malcolm, and to a lesser extent Barry, because he's only been involved in the last year, but Malcolm's been on the journey the whole time. And what I'm interested in is really adding to our existing bank of knowledge as to what factors have contributed most to the situation that we are now in. We had a regime of, to quote somebody else, blood, sweat, toil and tears, which I was part of back in 2018. And it was clear to me and to others that we had to change the culture of the council of accepting continual overspends on the revenue account. Therefore, there had to be introduction of an iron discipline. There had to be a change of attitude right through the organisation. And in particular, coming back to our scrutiny experience prior to 2018, I remember we were continually raising the question of unrealistic budget savings, particularly where partnerships were concerned. And I remember Graham Lorman was always forthright in saying, whenever there's a question of a saving depending on working with other partners, be suspicious and be rather skeptical. And he was very right. So we had to have a different attitude there. We had to introduce new personnel, a change really at the top, as they say in any organization. If it's in trouble, you don't blame the trade unions. You don't blame the people in the workforce. You blame the people at the top. And that was the case in our organization. We had serial changes, and we had the role of the commissioners. There was a serial change of leadership and direction. Now, what I wanted to get round to is to asking Malcolm, in addition to those points, Malcolm, and in addition to perhaps Lady Luck helping us in a small or rather a larger way, are there any other factors, are there any X factors which you can put your finger on and which might be of help to other councils in the north and the west as they start off, such that they don't get into the situation that we got in? And if they do, what is it that you think that we've done successfully to get out of trouble, which others up and down the country could learn a lesson from?
Yeah,
Michael, thank you. Malcolm.
Yeah, very pleased, Mike. Thank you for that. Yeah, I was scribbling on a few things as you were speaking, and the key to it all is it starts. See, the people in the accounts or the finance, they don't spend the money. What they do is they advise and they put it together, and it's the operational people that actually spend the money, you know, and that's what was happening before. And so where our success has been excellent operational people. It's all always down to people. We know that, and I think Teresa is a force to be reckoned with. There's a little doubt about that, and she's got the operational bit right. I'll give you a good example. Is that in the second year of these 3 years, it was going badly wrong. We were losing £1 million a month in children's area. And we were saying, well, if we don't sort this by the half year, we're in trouble. And we had to fix it because we had to change some of the people but the operational people, so that they were doing the services in that financial environment. You can't have, anybody can deliver services, but you've got to do it within a controlled environment. So it's the operational people you've got to get right. Now, I've been very fortunate. I had Ian Duncan in, and followed by Barry. I couldn't wish for better people than that. And so you've got so it's the people, the operations, and then the discipline to do the right things when you have to, even though it might be unpopular. And if you look at the finance team, you've got Barry, you've got James Smith below. These are really good people. They're top people, and we have at pretty much every level now. And so I would say it's just a darn shame we haven't got another 4 years, because those sort of people involved, you can do pretty much anything, and because they're so good, and so people, good operation people, discipline, and of course it's a team game. It's no one person scores all the goals. It's like Manchester United. Somebody scores the goals, but you need 11 players. And so I'd go back: people, operational competence, and discipline. And I think that's it, Mike.
Okay. Malcolm, just a supplementary, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sorry, Michael.
Yeah, just very quickly. Much is said largely behind the scenes about the role played by our commissioners. Particularly Brian Roberts on the finance side. You might have to choose your words carefully, Malcolm, but how would you assess the contribution made by our commissioners? They've said last week at full council, Tony McCardle, that they didn't have to make any directions in terms of telling us what to do to run the council. It was all nudges and winks and raising of eyebrows and things of that nature. Would you agree with that, or do you think that there was more to it in terms of the contribution they made? And I'm thinking particularly with the permission to use the capital asset from the sale of Angel Square to balance the budget in 2017 and 18 and get rid of the 30 million.
Yeah, well, I go back to the very first meeting I had. I can't remember if you were there or not, but we had all the press around. It was all going bad, and there was a load of press cameras and all sorts of things. And the guy that does Look East, I can't remember his name now, and he asked that very same question. How do you think you're going to get on with the commissioners here? And my answer to that was, it's a team game. And he said, oh, that's a good answer. And if I saw him again today, I'd say that's exactly what it's been. The best I can put the commissioners, and Brian's the most excellent accountant, finance guy. It really has been very good. It's like having a decent uncle. You know, they've been part of it. They haven't been overly pushy, but they've been part of it, and they've been excellent guys. They've been good. It's always been harmonious, and a few ups and downs, but nothing of any consequence. And I think they've added to the party. And but there's no one person scoring the goals here, and that's the point. And I think that we'll be starting to see them. They're all a bit demob happy at the moment, I'm bound to say, because of course the term time is almost closed, and so the meetings we have now are almost non-events. But the early ones, as you will well recall, were a little bit more tricky. But they're good guys, you know, and I think we've been very fortunate. We've managed to put together as good a team as you'll find in this land, and that's and the result you can see now. Going on further, we've got it set up, and I'm bound to say this for the two unitaries, whilst I get the opportunity, got a good setup. But the thing to, in my view, is those that are going on in the new year, and Chris will get bored here because I've told him 3 times already, is to look at the debt maturity profile. There's been actions taken that have put the debts way off to the right, and we've got we've spent 24 million paying back debt this year. Will be a similar number next year, but thereafter there's, I think it's 40, pretty much 40 years where it's very, very low numbers. So you have the ability to either eliminate debt, do other things. There's a blank canvas there, and that's been brought about by our good financial guys. Great opportunity if you've got the eyes to see it. Hopefully we have, hopefully whoever turns up after May. Does that answer your question, Mike? Yes, I'm rambling on a bit. Right.
Thanks, Malcolm.
Okay.
Just to keep the meeting going, I'm sad. I thought Jane Birch was going to go later than this, but sadly she's had to leave. Just to remind everyone, the item we're on is delivery of the 2021 council budget, and I appreciate some leeway there. Item 7 will be lessons learned. Now, making that point, Malcolm and Barry, what are your timescales in terms of being with us this morning? When do you have to go so that we can make sure that we use the lessons learned item to pick up some of these points? And I know I've got Jill and Cecile coming forward. What are your timescales, Barry?
As far as I'm concerned, Jim, I'll go when you're finished.
Okay, and Barry?
I can stay until the finish as well, Chair.
Okay, that doesn't necessarily mean that we will extend it outside of normal course. Yeah. And I certainly think Malcolm, very brave to mention only but one football team. I shall leave that on YouTube for your own.
I come from email. Rovers doesn't cut it up here.
Right, so I felt that Cecile put her hand up, then it went down, and then it was Jill. If there's no worry about that, Jill was then first. So Jill, then Cecile.
Sorry, it probably is more on the lessons learned, but what came through to me when Michael was speaking was the change has been learning to live within your means. And as Malcolm said, the finance guys are putting it together, but they don't actually do the spending. And so it seemed to me that the culture changed in that people weren't just spending when they got to a limit. They found some way of making sure they didn't go over that. So I felt that was underlying, big change. Obviously, lots of other things as well, but that really contributed to the change in fortune.
Yeah, thanks.
Still very, very, very valid. Cecile.
Yes, just a question for more for Malcolm than for Barry. I think when you said we should have stayed as a county council, I think because the commissioner was sent with a mission, it was to for us to be ready for unitary, and maybe it's a question also for Barry. we are scrutinizing the budget now, and it's nothing to say because we will see, and the audit will have a view when all that is finished in next year or the year after. But my question is, what to change? You know, it's like the Titanic, to change so quickly. What is a transformation that has been done in services to allow the finance to be balanced, but without the impetus of being unitary? Will we have done that transformation? Thank you so much.
Well, you will recall, Cecile, that you've been pretty close to this all the years, haven't you? I mean, you've been following it as closely as most, and you may recall in the first few months, you might have been around at that time as well, when everything was clamped down. Nobody spent anything. It was a sort of a typical recession approach, and you know, and at that point, I think Theresa came in and put the disciplines in, and that was it. There's no magic here. You know, it was all about doing what you say you'll do. When you say you're going to do it, you do it. And if you look, a very good example of this, I always thought, and it's a bit of a trivial one possibly. You may recall when we used to walk over from the old building to Angel Square, you'd find a dozen or 15 people out having a fag, you know, smoking. You don't see that now, and instead of having a cigarette, they're doing the work. You know, they're doing what they should be doing and pay for. Because time you had a cigarette, 5 minutes to walk down, 10 minutes cigarette. You know, it's a lot of time, and that in itself isn't hugely important. What is important is the discipline associated with it, and that's what's different. That's what's different. And if you look at the headcount situation, it hasn't changed much over those 3 years. I study it every month. Just to keep an eye on it, and it goes up and down, but broadly it's not knocking out people as you might do in industry. It's been all about discipline, and we're very lucky with Paul. You may recall Paul putting his he called it transformation, I call it productivity factors in, and it was absolutely excellent. And a number of people like that were brought in, of which Paul was one, and Ian Duncan and Barry were another, and they were all good people doing the right things in a disciplined manner. So no magic, no magic.
Can I have I might embarrass you, but last week, last week at Full Council, Councillor Lizzie Bowen had a question by Daniel Stone, and we have 700 vacancy at the moment at county. So 700 vacancy. With that, should have helped immensely in the thing. So sometimes I have, it's a bit of a disconnection. I think we should be modest in the achievement. I think the vacancy and all that have helped us immensely.
Yeah, sure,
Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Well, there's no one factor, Cecile. It's you know these things, running companies. No one single thing ever does it. Usually, it's a bit like the cycling teams. It's a detail and hundreds of different things. And if there is one thing, it's a good operational management, and we've got that. Very fortunate. We've had our moments, but we've got excellent operational and led by Theresa. And you know, like her or loathe her, she's going to be missed. I think she is anyway.
I think we should run with like at this moment, given that we're in public.
Right, Jim. Yeah, too dangerous anyway.
So thank you, Cecile. I've got one or two questions myself, but I see Rebecca on this particular item, delivery of the budget. Rebecca.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't been particularly involved in finance at NCC, but colleagues in the West will know, but in the North, I'm pleased to be the Chairman of Finance for the, portfolio holder for finance for the West. And last night I was able to deliver the balanced budget, which I just think reflects the immense amount of work, and I hope I paid tribute to it yesterday, that's gone on by Malcolm, by Barry, by the officers, by the scrutiny. It really made my job so much easier. And from my perspective, watching how a grip has been taken on the finances of NCC has been a really fantastic learning curve. And I hope that whoever fulfills the role in the future will take really, really good lessons. But it is absolutely, as Malcolm has just summed it up, it is having a really tight grip on processes, on organisation, on knowing where the money is spent. I did some finance training through the LGA when I started, and they did describe it as running a business or your home finances. It is as simple as income and outgoings. You've got pots, you've got to manage them. As an individual, I hate debt, and I completely understand Malcolm's viewpoint about dealing with debt, which is so important, and taking the opportunities that go forward. But I won't linger. I just express my thanks in the work that NCC has done, and also in the change of culture with the districts and boroughs, because I'm also an SNC councillor, and that has been dramatic. And I do think that feeds into the successful outcome that we see today at NCC and the future of the two unitaries going forward.
Thank you, Rebecca. I see no other hands at the moment, and please come in if anyone does wish to. On the budget report of the 9th of February, item 5 indicates as it's the final cabinet for the council, delegate authority to Executive Director of Finance to approve any reserve movements and bad debt write-off that would normally require the cabinet, which won't meet. What is the current situation and any volume of bad debt write-off that has taken place since the 9th, not long ago, or might take place before the demise of the county council, please? I don't know, Barry or Malcolm, whomever.
I can step in, Chair. So if you recollect, around about 2 monitoring reports ago, we did a really big write-off. And what we're trying to do is make sure that the data that we've got in the systems is ship-shape and tidy for the 2 unitary councils. So I'm not expecting huge amounts of write-offs to happen between now and the end of March, because we took care of most of it back in the mid-year. Personally, I haven't written anything off recently. That's outside of my delegated limits, and I'm not expecting huge write-offs to transact between now and the year end.
Yeah, can I have a word here?
Yes,
Jim?
Malcolm.
This is quite a significant point here. I mean, what Barry's demonstrated there is I believe we've got it in control for this year. So there will be something probably, but there won't be any nasty surprises. Going back again 3 years, and waking you up again, Mike, and you may recall that we looked at the bad debt situation, and what had happened over a number of years had been bad debts hadn't been written off, and so as a consequence they built up, and we had a very significant write-off as more or less the first action that we did to try and bring reality to bear, and ever since then, hopefully I'm not correct in saying that we've done it systematically and recognise reality on a year-on-year basis. But initially, it was a big lump of cash. But you know, you've got to face reality, and I think that's if there's another lesson to be learned, Jill, this probably goes with that one. Face reality. Yes. So and Barry's got it as taped as anybody's ever going to get it, I think, now here.
Thank you. And again, another question from me. Paragraph 5.28 in the budget report, and given that anyone who might be watching doesn't have access to that, Children First Northamptonshire reporting a net staffing underspend of 0.5 million, even though the service is operating with a higher reliance on agency staff than planned for in budgets. This additional cost is offset by underspends due to high level of vacancies over and above those being covered by agency staff. Based on current assumptions, the staffing underspend may increase further. So the question, I suppose, is how much is the underspend for the year predicated on staff vacancies, which clearly at the beginning of the budget year were perceived to be roles that should be filled to achieve the service.
Sure.
The question is how much of that is based on staff vacancies. Just picking out that 5.28 paragraph, just looking at it, it's I think page 19.
Yeah, I mean, one would have to do the numbers on this, Jim. I can't answer the question offhand, but you know, if what you got to look at is, are the services being delivered? I mean, very often you at the beginning of a budget, you do tend to overestimate, as one does, confession, so that you make sure you come under. And I can't speak for what should and shouldn't be in children's services. I'm just not qualified for that. All I can say, and I know Dr. Barrow said, this is the number that we currently face, and what the operational people do there is in adults or children in particular. That's not within our remit, I think. Can't answer the question.
If I could add, Chair, that the figure that we've got there is effectively the council's figure until the 31st of October. Because as we know, the Children's Trust took responsibility for running children's services from 1st November onwards. So effectively, that's the council's fixed position from 1st of April to 31st of October. And that underspend is made up of a number of factors. And you're right, and that staffing is the main one, but also care packages feed into that as well. Historically, Children's has run with a higher level of vacancies and a higher level of agency staff as well. And many of the transformation programs that are in place, especially funded by Business Rates Pilot, is to address that. And I know that the Trust is making great inroads into recruiting and staffing and reducing agency costs and filling those vacancies as well. But you will not see the impact of that because that's in the Children's Trust contract price from 1st November onwards. What you see in the monitoring report is the impact of the council's budget from 1st of April to 31st of October.
Thank you, both Malcolm and Barry. I've got Councillor Norman.
Thank you. Just on the Cabinet report, which obviously goes to period 9, 4.3, there's a mention of £2 million set aside for service investments, of which 1.3 million is not yet spent, at least at the end of period 9 it wasn't. I just wanted to check whether that's still the case and whether that just will result in another 1.3 million going across to the two unitaries as part of the underspend at the end of the day, if that's the likely position.
Don't know, Barry. Any ideas?
I think, Chair, that the majority of that will be spent by the end of the year. We've certainly invested money into trading standards and emergency planning, which we're short of money. But also there's some additional costs in relation to the establishment of the Children's Trust that will be covered by that as well. If you remember from the October scrutiny, we referred to diseconomies of scale in the Children's Trust, and it'll be met from that fund rather than impact the bottom line budget.
Thank you, Graham. Just moving to another question, and I'm conscious if any other colleague wants to ask other questions. COVID financial exposure for Northampton Adult Social Services is now reported at 15.1 million on page 24, compared to 13.4 million at the end of period 6. Is that change within the anticipated range expected? That's from 13.4 to 15.1 financial exposure to COVID. I don't know. Either Malcolm or Barry. Barry?
Yeah, I can step in there, Chair. And I think I've said previously at scrutiny, this is the most volatile part of the budget this year. And it's where most of the COVID funding has been going in and out of because of hospital discharges and the impact of lockdowns and peak hospital capacity. So it is a moving feast because if you think back, the hospital admissions spiked in March, came down in July, and started spiking again in September. So this is a very volatile budget. At the moment, as we know, admissions are down, so should take some of the pressure off the COVID funding there. But I don't think any of us this time last year expected we would be where we are still this time this year, if you know what I mean, if I'm not speaking in riddles. So where the COVID funding has helped the measure, it substantially, and it was always the government's intention, and it would be so as well, is coping with the fluctuations in adult social care.
Yes.
You may recall, Chair, that I reported that when we went into this current wave, that we went in with a decent war chest, and that's proven to be the case so far. I keep saying so far because none of us know where we're going really on this one, but we are a little bit more confident now than we were, because you may have noticed just in the last week or so that there's £3 million been given to schools to support that. Now, had we been up against it in difficulties, we wouldn't have done that. Well, we couldn't have done that, but that's what happened. So that gives you a flavour of where we are, I think.
Thank you. And my last question, and I think the last question, as no other colleagues have shown a requirement to speak. With the capital and still skating into the outside of the capital receipts outside of confidentiality, if they are not achieved before the demise of the county at the end of March, how will they be attributed into the accounts of North and West? And I may be getting this wrong, but I hope I'm not. Obviously, those capital receipts will either be in the North or be in the West, whereas at the moment they would be in the general capital receipt fund of the county. So unless it's too confidential to answer, how will those capital receipts be allocated to the North and West after the end of March?
Well, we'd expect to get them in this year, as Barry's already gone through in some detail. And you may recall, if you were at the meeting, that Rebecca gave a presentation, and there's currently an allocated, I think, 10 million for the North and 10 million for the South is available in capital receipts, which was an increase from the 12 that was originally mooted, but so it's 10. Now, where that this particular load of capital receipts go, I think we're expecting them to go in NCC. What happens if something goes wrong and it doesn't? I think I'm not quite sure, to be perfectly honest. I have to turn to Barry, see if he's got a good idea.
At last, a question that Barry.
It's a very good question, Chair, because what we're talking about would be reallocation of capital receipt and general reserve if we had to take it out of revenue. And both are split by agreement between North and West. And as Councillor Longley says, the clues are in the reports that are going to the full councils for budget setting in terms of their flexible use of capital receipts policies and whatever else. So I think to answer your question, if those receipts did carry forward, then the split of them or where they landed would have to be with joint agreement between both West and North through their statutory offices.
That sounds like an exciting meeting. I just wanted to interrogate it and feel reasonably glad that 6 years on I can still ask a question that's valid. Well, I now want to draw a close to that item. I think we've gone through delivery of budget, and I immediately see the blue hand, and Malcolm stops me midstream. Malcolm.
Sorry, Chair. There is one item I wanted to leave with everybody today. And it's best left at the end so everybody remembers it, I hope. I don't know where Cecile is. I think I see her name there now. But when we first started together, we were same time, you may recall, Cecile, same time, same day. One of the things that we first saw, and we didn't know what they were until Cecile looked it up on the internet, and that's a Lobo loan. You may recall that. I think you were the first to spot it, and we.
Well, I think you should try to explain to me again. I know what they are.
Can I leave the Lobo explanation?
Yeah, right. Well, everybody who really wants to hear it, I'll explain. But anyway, the upshot of it is that these are dangerous loans, and we've got them down from 150 million down to just over 99.5. But they're still there, and they're right out in the far on the far right. They need to be dealt. They're currently being negotiated at the moment, as I understand it, but that's one to be alive to. And now the other thing to be alive to is that although we've got another year to pay off very much as this year, we've paid 24 million off this year. It'll be similar next year. Then you've got this 40 years, but there's still a lot of debt way out. And you've got to be alive to the fact that sooner or later, and I personally, we've had this discussion before, Chris, I think more like sooner, interest rates will rise. Now, a lot of them are fixed loans, so that's not, but the whole arrangement is likely to change. And we've got excellent arrangements at the moment, but we pay out, I think it was just under 20 million this year. So if in the new authorities, be alive to where the interest rates are going. And I'd like to end on that, if that's all right, Chair.
No problem at all. I think Lobo should definitely, if we weren't doing virtual meetings, should be an arm on the bar type of a conversation. But I do understand that. That would be after we talked about Manchester United and cycling. So I'm therefore drawing that particular item to a close, and the outcome we were hoping for. The committee identifies any comments, which I think we've done from the agenda, and agrees arrangements for relaying any comments or recommendations to the appropriate decision maker. I'm going to go over to James, because decision makers are, I think, as we said, a bit demob happy. But James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I mean, as you've highlighted, there's been a good discussion. Individual members have had various individual comments. The standard question at the end of that kind of discussion is whether there is anything that the committee wants to say as a whole. If there is, there is then a question as to how that is relayed onwards. Clearly, there will be a set of minutes arising from this meeting, as there would be at any other time, which will record the discussion and any conclusions from the committee as a whole. It's just a question then as to whether there is anything else the committee wish to do to send off its comments to the relevant people or authorities. Clearly, if there is nothing that the committee as a whole wishes to conclude, just to leave it as comments from individual members during the course of discussion, then the question about actions is more moot.
Thank you, James, making it extremely clear as ever. I've got Councillor Stammer and Councillor Perry on what we might send off to others. Councillor Stammer.
Don't actually feel the urge that to make any further comments, Chair. I think we've given this a good going over. We've had some good answers. James has rightly said there will be minutes which clarify the points that were made and the answers given. I'd be happy to leave it at that.
Thank you, Chris. Most helpful. Victoria.
Thank you, Chair. I think the one point that I would want to stress is that I think the committee's worked because at some point we drew a line under the previous mistakes and started focusing on what we could do to solve it. And I still too often hear now, thrown about in meetings, it was your fault, the council did this, the council did that. We know that. Get over it, move on. We've solved it. And what we should be doing is say, how have we solved it? What worked? And what worked was focusing on going forward. And my message to the new councils, and this isn't just opposition members, this is councillors from our own group, that you have to stop talking about past errors, past mistakes, and look at what we did to solve them. And this committee is a really good example of how we did that. The staff are a really good example of how we did that. One point I wanted to make, I can remember, this is an anecdote like Malcolm said about the smoking. When we first went into this crisis, there were staff members taking off their lanyards when they left the office because they were getting abuse in the streets. I mean, how bad is that? But those staff have stayed with us, those staff have turned it round and they've focused on forward. So my message is to learn from the past, don't dwell on it. And it isn't crowing, it isn't gloating, it isn't, there is a complete humbleness in what's happened here. But that has to stop, and that is why this committee has worked, because we left it at the door and we focused on the future. So over and out from me.
Thank you, Victoria. So we are at the moment that there is nothing further to pass on from this committee and from this debate. And yes, I've got you, Chris. That's what we're speaking to now. Anything to pass on? from the budget this year?
From the budget this year, I would say more of the same, and it's about working as one team. Echoing what Victoria said, we are all one team, and we're all here for the benefit of the people of Northamptonshire. Looking at the budget, we've all worked hard, some more than others. I can't take credit for being very good at finances, but we've all worked very hard at making sure that we've brought in a balanced budget for the people of Northamptonshire, not for one team or another team. We are one team.
Thank you, Chris. On that note, I will draw a close to item number 6. Sorry, James, come back.
Sorry to jump in. Councillor Longley is indicating, I don't know whether that's a new indication or a previous one.
I didn't see his hand.
He's also muted.
I've got to say it. You're muted, Councillor Longley.
I know. I didn't believe I was, James. So no, I've said too much already, probably.
Okay, and sorry, then Chair, just to revert back to myself. There does need to be a resolution at the end of discussion. Normally, the resolution where there is nothing more specific to say is simply to note the current position. At the risk of putting words into the committee's mouth, I don't know whether the committee would want to go slightly further at all and not just note but possibly welcome, and if it welcomes the current position, whether it would wish to make any reference along the lines of commending those responsible for the position reached. But if nothing else, then it's a noting of the current position.
Then colleagues, can I suggest that we note the current position in relation? Chris, I'm never going to get past number 6, am I? I think we need a resolution which does 2 things: that we note and the current position, that there's nothing that we wish to send on. And I have to say that we've got Barry and Malcolm here. We've had the leader as well. Anything should be carried on by word of mouth, and commend the budgetary position that we see today. Now, Chris, I'd love you to move that.
I'd be happy to move that, Chair, and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity.
And have we a seconder for that resolution, which James will just put the words around?
Yes, second that, and commend the officers and thank them for their work.
Thank you, Graham. I think that absolutely goes without saying, and I appreciate you reaffirming that point. So, James, you have what you need to close off item 6. If I try and remember it all the way through, I'm not sure who signs. How do these minutes get signed off? Because we don't have another meeting to do that, and maybe I'll just leave that hanging. Through
you, Chair, that it was covered by a report from the monitoring officer to full council. If I recollect correctly, the minutes of all committees will be signed off by the monitoring officer in consultation with the committee chair.
Okay, that's lovely.
So I think there was a wrinkle that they would be sent to councillors, and they would have 5 days to comment before being sent to for that consultation. That's right, isn't it?
There we are. There the chairman speaks. Thank you, Graham. So item number 7, then our last item will be number 8, responses to previous. Item number 7 is lessons learned from carrying out overview and scrutiny at Northamptonshire County Council. And to consider learning that could be relayed to successors at North Northamptonshire and West Northamptonshire councils. And I'm delighted that James may well have picked up 1 or 2 comments that eked into number 7. Really, it's a question of what we want to send on to our successors in title. And we also had the lessons learnt reports kindly forwarded From the Commissioner's website on the Council website, the 2 lessons learnt reports were circulated for us to be able to read, and I would imagine that they could go off as they are from us to north and west. But at that point, I think the only other thing was Malcolm's point about a monthly meeting, which was most helpful in those early stages. I think James has already got that. So lessons learnt, anything that we wish to point out to our successors in title. So, Councillor, if I've got this right, I've got Councillor Irving Swift, Councillor Mercer, Lorman, Stamborough. I hope I've got that in the right order.
Yes. I might put a damper here, because for me, the scrutiny is a very important role. And beside you, who is an independent, Councillor Stamborough, who is a Lib Dem, we have no opposition. And that is the only time when you do scrutiny that you can really go to the nitty-gritty and have your cabinet into account and ask them difficult questions. So I find it that it's not good to be grandstanding at full council. The scrutiny is where the works start. And therefore, if there is lesson learned, it is that scrutiny should have been more respected and more attended by the opposition. And as a result, today, our last scrutiny, we have no our major opposition, the Labour, is not present. So what does it say? It says that we were not good at scrutiny, or they didn't bother. And I find that very, very disturbing, because scrutiny is the only thing. We could have drill, and we did, but it's the last one. But that is the only time you have a member of cabinet who has to answer the question in a small group, and we all work together for the better good. So that is my point. Never underestimate the power of scrutiny. And today, unfortunately, we fail. Thank you.
So just as chairman, and I've got 4 other speakers, to encapsulate that, and from James's point of view, something along the lines that this committee recognises that good scrutiny relies on good attendance from all. Simple as that, I would say. And I can say from 6 years experience that Councillor Irving Swift's comments would reflect throughout that time, irrespective of the status of the council. Cecile, thank you. I'm very much hoping I've got this right, because I've now got Jill, Graham, Chris Stamborough, and then Michael Clark. I hope I've got that in the right, and Victoria's come there as well. So, Jill, would you kindly?
Yeah, thank you. I initially put my hand up to say, had a message from Councillor Eakins. Could we please record his apologies, since he's not well at the moment. So,
oh, sorry to hear that.
Yes, but on to this item. Something sort of points that I'd like to make are, when we scrutinised budget, particularly a few years ago, we had a thorough scrutiny of each directorate, one day at a time. We went through every single directorate, and I think that really, we really went into it thoroughly, and I think that is something that the future authorities need to take on board. And what I found most useful was when public speakers came to tell us things, because that often meant that we were informed about things that were going on at the shop floor that we wouldn't have been privy to otherwise, and that really helped. We also underwent training, and the CFPS came and spoke to us, and one of the things that they spoke about was transparency, and this was something that Max Culler was also very hot on, was everyone, backbenchers particularly, should be able to see all of the papers, all of the, I always call pink papers because we always print them on pink, is the things that are not necessarily need to go out into the public because they're perhaps confidential and might cause problems if they were generally available, but that all councillors are able to both attend sessions of meetings where those are discussed and get those papers. I think those are two lessons that we can take from the past. I think the scrutiny has worked very well here. I think it's been very, the cross-party aspect of it has been very good, and we've all worked well together. And I think another aspect was having our pre-meetings, having a meeting to discuss the agenda. That I think has worked very well, as was said earlier on, the monthly meetings that were held specifically with the budget scrutiny, etc. So, but I think, and also task and finish groups, I think they've worked very well as well. Been on the highways and the looking into the social worker situation, and those I think have been very good. You can get in depth in those, and you can pass on information to others that haven't looked into it so thoroughly. So I would suggest those as recommendations.
Jill, that's amazingly useful and insightful as well. As so many people are wishing to speak, which is brilliant, I'm just going to touch base with James after each speaker very briefly, just to comfort myself that those points have been picked up, notwithstanding the fact, of course, we can watch the video again. James, are you comfortable with picking up those points? And I think just from the chair, and then I'm going to go on to Councillor Lawman, I would say and reinforce what Jill has said, is that unless it's private and confidential within the scales of whatever local government act it is, all members should be able to at least observe, even if they're not on the committee, so that those who want to, going back to Cecile's point, want to sit and look through scrutiny or observe scrutiny meetings can do so. So, more or less, if it's not private and confidential, any member duly elected should be able to attend. So James, thank you for that. What I'm not going to perhaps do is ask James to reiterate this whole list of things. So we'll go through each colleague and then we'll just briefly pause. So Councillor Lawman.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, Councillor Mercer's made a lot of the points, so I'll just reiterate those just to support them. The meeting should be accessible, not just to the public, but also to every councillor. And that means that every councillor should be able to contribute, not just watch. They should be able to, and that has happened in the past, that councillors were able to come along and make a contribution. That's important. Working parties, fully agree with that. That enables those with expertise or experience to go off and or a particular interest to go off and examine that, and that can be very small or it can be slightly larger. The size can vary. Councillor Clark was kind enough to pick up earlier my continuing point about working in partnership with other organisations and relying on what they might do. So that's something we need to say to our successors, be mindful of that when your budget. And another thing that I was also always mindful of was trying to get full year benefits of something that only happened part year, because it took a while to get organised, and that happened all the time. That things were put in the budget, but then they drifted on and weren't implemented for whatever reason. Obviously, we should be mindful of that. I think we should.
So sorry, Graham, we have lost
we've still got one
Yeah.
officer in, at least one officer in. So
Shall we just? Well spotted. I heard the sound. I'm trying to spot who it was. Waiting room.
Jim, you're the host, so you'll need to let him back in.
Yeah.
I just need to understand how to do it. I can see waiting room 1.
You need
message.
to put the list of participants up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Waiting room 1.
And it should say he's in there waiting to come in.
You should just say admit.
Admit Raj.
Yeah.
What I've got.
We lost Raj
Done
out.
that.
Yeah.
Yes, we haven't got Raj either.
Go on. Admit who's ever's there.
Yeah, I just admitted Raj.
Lovely.
It's a fire. Raj, do you know, this is a bit like watching NASA and landing on Mars, isn't it? Raj, are you able to carry on for James or know his whereabouts in the ether? There you are. Hello, Raj.
Hi, yeah, sorry, it just kicked me as well. I'm not sure entirely what's going on. I can call James quickly though.
Yes, by all means. Yeah, it's too crucial perhaps to miss that. But if you want to try, James, I'm assuming that the IT system got told a few minutes before we finished this meeting that it was finished. But,
yeah, no, I think he must have lost connection and it must
okay.
have moved the co-host. But I'll just
Raj, are you okay? And I will keep watching to admit. Are you okay to carry on with that, Graham?
Yeah, I nearly finished it. So just to agree the point about getting the Centre for Policy Studies in to do training, that's important, but also to have a communications budget of some sort so that people know when the sessions are on, know when they can attend, not just at budget time, but at all any time where there's an item on. It must be better publicised for the people who come and make their point, because as was said, the people on the shop floor really know better and produce very valuable contributions.
Thank you. And Raj has picked up part of of Graham's comments. Welcome back, James.
Thank you, Chair. I think I just lost my connection there. I'm glad to see the meeting carried on without me.
No, that's no problem. I'm guessing if you note the time in the recording, Raj and yourself will pick up. Graham was reaffirming and just adding 1 or 2 points there. So I'll say thank you to Graham, and just to be sure, I've now got Chris Stambra, Michael Clark, Victoria and Barry Scarr. So Chris Stambra.
Thank you, Chair. So I just wondered whether you wanted to check with Barry that he didn't have something he wants to say now before we all rattle on.
I'm very happy to do that.
Happy to wait until my allotted turn, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Barry.
Thanks, Barry. Okay, right. So I've got a number of things. Sorry about this. I'll be as quick as I can. And I'm happy to circulate this by email, James, afterwards. So don't feel you have to get these words of wisdom down, and especially if they're not words of wisdom.
Thank you.
Okay, so lessons learned, focus on the big ticket items, whether that's financial or in impact, but not necessarily financial. So for example, things we looked at that had an impact but weren't necessarily financial were libraries, early years settings, and social worker recruitment and retention. Don't get distracted by rabbit holes. Some issues are really nice to look at, but try and focus. Adopt the agenda setting pre-meet/meeting structure. It works well. Have an opposition chair for all scrutiny committees, in my view. It's incumbent on the opposition to pick the right person, and it mustn't be jobs for the boys or some sort of reward. Resource scrutiny adequately, and that's officer time I'm talking about there, not necessarily money. Make it all party, involve all political groups. Vice chairs are very important. It is about teamwork. Embrace the public and experts. They're your friends, and also the CFPS can help an awful lot. Don't neglect health scrutiny. It's statutory and will be an important area if closer and closer working is to become a reality. Don't reinvent the wheel. Come out of your silo. What is best practice elsewhere? Steal good ideas. Allow councillors to attend meetings and participate actively and encourage it. And that goes for task and finish groups too. That's all councillors, I should say. Share information with other councillors, including the information presented to task and finish groups. Challenge the executive, have a regular slot on their agenda. Written reports to the executive where needed. Never get political. Find a way to ensure the Children's Trust is properly scrutinised and held to account. How do others do it who have trusts? Maybe a joint scrutiny task and finish group with the West will be a way forward, similar to what we did with LGSS. Don't be hidebound by time. Yes, run efficient meetings that stay on task, but good scrutiny will take as long as it takes. Scrutiny is a conversation. Allow exchanges at committee meetings to be just that. The back and forth, the flow is important. Give the member the floor, but make sure the chair always has control. And finally, make sure your council is doing the boring well. Challenge hard if it's not, and don't let them get distracted by shiny things. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris. I always remember the county-wide travellers unit, 66,000, you know, easy to reflect back. And thank you, Chris, for forwarding that on to James. I'm conscious that he will put this report together and we'll have the video of it. Michael Clark, Michael, you.
Yeah, briefly, Mr. Chairman, I just want to centre on one point, which really I think has come home to me as a result of my experience on scrutiny, and that is the importance of persistence. Scrutiny, I think, is at its best if it gets access to the information and the people that it wants access to within reason. And I cast my mind back to our scrutiny when I think you were running it, Mr. Chairman, of 2017-18 of the 18-19 budget. And one of the points which was raised at the time were question marks over the use of the flexible use of capital receipts. And you will remember that. And I think Councillor Perry was to the fore in that as well. But we were given nothing but pushback at the time. It was almost regarded as read, that we really didn't understand it. It was too complicated and it wasn't really our business. And we shouldn't be a pain in the proverbial. Now, when we look back on that, it really opened up a can of worms, because if we had been persistent, we had thorough explanations, I think we might have had earlier exposure of the fact that the council had been misled into using capital receipts incorrectly to prop up the revenue account, where there wasn't any transformation attached to it. Now, we were onto that 3.5 years ago at scrutiny, but through various methods, we were diverted, as Councillor Stambra said. We went chasing up other avenues and obsessing with other points. But we were aware of the risks involved, but unfortunately nothing came of it. So coming back to the key word here, I think our successors in the other councils should not be afraid to make themselves an inconvenient problem to the administration, to others who they feel they need to hold to account. Be persistent, don't give up if you get pushback at the first request for information, and ensure that we have access to all the things, as Mr. Callis said. Don't take no for an answer. You as scrutiny should have access to everything going on in the council. There shouldn't be any no-go areas within reason. As far as of confidentiality are concerned, we respect that. But none of the areas of common business, especially with the figures and so on, should be regarded as off limits. So be persistent, don't take no for an answer, and stick at it until, and that can only produce better quality results and accountability. That's all I wanted to say.
Michael, that's excellent, and very much agreed. Very much agreed. Victoria.
Oh, sorry about the dogs in the background still going. Yeah, just two things really that I don't think have been covered. One is with regard to the chair, bear in mind it should be the most competent person for the job. And Councillor Scrimshaw wasn't a good chair because he was an opposition councillor. He was a good chair because he was really competent. I'm just putting that out there. That's not passing judgment on whether it should be someone from the opposition, but it has to be the right person. That is really important. And political allegiance doesn't dictate that. And secondly, now Cecile alluded to this as well, but is encouraging within our own groups, within our own political groups, all our councillors to look at the scrutiny agenda and ask questions. If they've got an area of particular interest, they've got an opportunity in public to come and question the portfolio holder. All too often, they suddenly appear from the wilderness at full council when there's a camera in the place, their face and the public are there to ask these passionate questions, and they're deeply concerned and etc., etc. But they haven't come to scrutiny and expressed that. And that makes me a little bit cynical that it could just be for publicity and not true concern. And I'm not, this is all political groups saying any in particular, it is all. By doing so, they will improve their knowledge as well. But if you really do care, there are lots of opportunities to have access to the people who are making decisions. And if you don't take those opportunities, then forgive me, I will be completely cynical about your motives.
Victoria, thank you, and that resonates quite strongly. And I certainly know from my personal point of view, going to as many meetings in the north as I can do, whether or not I'm allowed to speak, is a brilliant way of getting to know the people who, at the simplest level, might sort a ward issue out or a residence issue out because they actually seen your face and they know you. But thank you for that. I'm just looking through now. I've got Barry, and then I've got Jill, Chris, and Michael. I didn't see the order to come back. And Malcolm, you want to hold on. Sorry, let me just make sure I'm managing this effectively after Victoria's point. So I've got Barry, Jill, and Michael.
Take me off the list, Mr. Chairman. I've asked my questions. Thank you.
Okay. So I've got Barry, Jill, you still got you've got a question. Okay. So Barry, do come in, and then Jill. Sorry for that mix. Barry.
Thank you, Chair. And as this is lessons learned, I thought I'd give you an offset perspective on scrutiny. After my 18 months here, that's Northamptonshire.
Thank you.
I don't think I've missed a single scrutiny meeting at the time I've been here. I think scrutiny is a strange meeting for officers. We come to advise the portfolio holder and answer detailed questions on the report, but always aware that we could be asked any question on any subject at any time, which is doesn't happen in any other committee meeting. And because of that, it relies on a level of honesty and respect between officers and members for it to work well. And I think, I have worked at other places in the past where it's been used as a place to bash officers or try and trap them into gotcha moments, which doesn't work particularly well. I've always found that the Northamptonshire scrutiny has worked really well in that respect, that the respect and honesty between officers and members is at the right level, while members ask very searching questions of officers. And I think that's an important thing as we roll forward as well, because if that relationship isn't there, then scrutiny doesn't work particularly well. And I suppose from as this is probably my last opportunity to speak on a personal level, is just to thank all members of the way that they've treated me at scrutiny, and I wish you all the very best for the future.
Barry, brilliant, absolutely insightful. And I think as I've travelled around the country, I've seen some interesting scrutiny in other meetings and the dynamics, but thank you for that insight as well, very much so. Jill.
Yes, just something that recently in the last 3 years, we've only had one scrutiny meeting where I think it's worked very well. It has been totally focused on finance, and we've been told not to look at other things. I think in our circumstances, we had to accept that, and possibly it was the right decision. Ideally, I think there should be more than one scrutiny committee, because the amount of time available just isn't sufficient with one. I mean, health scrutiny, as Chris just said, really shouldn't be scrimped on, and we really haven't had time to do that justice. But I think back to some of the really good task and finish groups that we started up that had to be chopped off in their prime, like adoption of roads, which is a continuing problem, like exclusions from schools, which is a continuing problem. And we never got to the end of those two scrutiny reviews. We were had them curtailed. So I think certainly more than one scrutiny is ideal. And I'm really glad that having suggested this, the North, for instance, has gone to 2, and I think the West has gone to 3. So that's one thing. And the other thing is resourcing well, that somebody just mentioned, because I think if we are told, well, there aren't the resources to have 2 or more committees, that would be a real shame, because I think it has proved that certainly the Centre for Public Scrutiny said that scrutiny is absolutely vital, and we can not just criticise, challenge, but we can support as well. And I think and help to, and also what we've proved is that get in early and before decisions are made, and help to make sure that they're made correctly, maybe make slight suggestions along the way. So I think early scrutiny is good, and sufficient resources, I would say, and it does always worry me when you see we will do that providing there are resources, because I think if you want them, you will always find them.
Jill, thank you very much. I see James is wishing to speak. I've got 1 or 2 comments as well. James, I was going to ask Malcolm if you wanted to give a couple of sentences as well. James, would you prefer to come in before Malcolm on that?
Councillor Longley first.
Okay, Malcolm, and you hadn't raised your hand for that, but if you had a couple of sentences, fine. If you feel you've contributed, which you have amazingly this morning anyway, don't worry.
Yeah, Chair, I don't think I've got anything more to say than I've said already, and I sort of follow up with Barry. I thought that Barry was very eloquent on what he said as well. You know, coming along to these meetings, you never know quite what to expect, you know, whether you're doing well or doing badly. You can always ask a difficult question. So no, nothing at all there really, Chair, other than thanks very much, and hope we've given some square answers.
As you absolutely have.
I think Councillor Malcolm Waters also had his hand up.
Sorry, not. Sorry, Malcolm Waters, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. Can I come in now?
You can indeed. Yes, I didn't see your blue hand. Apologies.
Chair, I've been scrutinising the committee as a whole. Since we started this new committee in 2018, there's only 7 of us left originally. 12 members have only lasted a year. Now, why are members not lasting more than a year? Because the interest that they found wasn't what they wanted, I assume. So I believe that's a big danger there. And the situation is we've had one person who only came on the committee for a month. Now, here we are saying, and it's something that, just take our Jill's point of view, that the new authorities are looking for 2 to 3 scrutiny committees. We've only got 1, and we can't really support or get the support from the councils which we have now. So is that a danger for the new committees to look at, to make sure that Victoria said it's important to get the right chair, and I certainly support that. And I thank Mick for what all he's done. But it does concern me. The fact is that we've only got 7 members initially started this and carried it through, where we've got 12 members who have come on for a year only and left. Now, is there a sign there that we must be taking up to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future? Thank you, Chair.
Malcolm, thank you for that. And it is a very valid point, perhaps underlies a lot of local government processes. I don't know, perhaps the answer is that we might give a takeaway which says that those who are on scrutiny, it's their attendance is published, is made known to the community in that way, so that the community know that they are attending. But I think the point you've made is that if a councillor is placed on scrutiny, they should do everything they can, within constraints, to attend those meetings and to ask the questions. And I certainly, just picking up 1 or 2 points, no one else has asked to speak. I absolutely agree with Jill about early scrutiny. In the beginning, back in the 2003, certainly at Kettering, we had a forward-looking and a backward-looking scrutiny, and the forward-looking scrutiny always struggled to get the cabinet to feed it with these policies are going forward. And I think that was where 1 or 2 colleagues have mentioned the politics of it, almost, well, we're going to hold this to our chest and we'll launch this budget onto the community and see how it goes, rather than much earlier on. We used to scrutinise at the county in December, January, and in reality, all those policies going into the budget had been maturing for months, and scrutiny could have received them. So I think forward scrutiny, and some of colleagues have mentioned it, is really important. This is what we're intending to do with a particular issue. Let it scrutinise. The benefit of that is, of course, that the community may latch onto it and be more interested in contributing than they are in a very finite period. The other thing that I've always felt, and it's not a takeaway from here, is scrutiny should be more mobile. If Durham is doing a brilliant job on children's services, or wherever, I'll use Northumberland for Barry, amending the roads particularly well, we should be mobile. We should get in a car or two when it's permissible and go and talk to the people doing it rather than not. And that rolls very quickly on as another takeaway from this. Virtual, if we can't get in a car, we don't want to go to Northumberland, although I would commend it because it's a beautiful county, or Devon, the scrutiny should embrace the opportunity of having virtual experts talking to them. And that ability should always be there, even if we're all sitting in the same room. We should have that virtual opportunity to be there. My other takeaway is engaging with the media, fully engaging. So when talking about major issues, we really try and get the community involved. At one point, there were almost some mutterings because some of our union colleagues came to scrutiny at the point at which I was chairing it. 1 or 2 people said, well, should the unions be in on scrutiny? Yes, in my opinion, yes, they should. They have their management structures which should be respected, but they also should be able to contribute because they are representing their members, on the front line. So those are just a few takeaways. I've got Graham coming in. I just wanted to ask, when colleagues this morning mentioned about opposition, and Victoria mentioned about the right chairman, because sometimes that person doesn't appear to be right, are we saying that all scrutiny in our 2 new authorities should be chaired by opposition councillors? Or are we saying finance scrutiny? How are we actually sending a message about not being chaired by what might be called the administration? So I might sort of pose that to Graham. I saw some shakes of heads, but what does James want to send away from here about the political party that chairs opposition, so to speak? But Graham, I'm coming to you.
Well, I don't want to get involved in telling the new authorities what they must do about that. Their members will have something. But there were 2 points. Firstly, virtual. I agree with that. It certainly make task and finish groups easier. But of course, the main way one has to be in public, and will follow whatever rules the government comes out with after May. But the thing I wanted to say was, you mentioned forward looking. Well, of course, there is a thing with the executive option of a forward plan that has to be published of decisions that are going to cabinet. And I think all councillors, but Scrutiny in particular, should take more notice of the forward plan and use that to drive some of the things it does, because that's where the clues are as to what the cabinet is going to be discussing, and things that might crop up that will be of interest. So that would be one of my points. You use the forward plan to drive some of what you do.
Thank you, Graham. I absolutely agree with that. But the point is that the forward plan, going back to other colleagues, there has to be resources, and there should be almost a scrutiny committee which is looking at the forward plan that is embedded, because I know that we've often said that, but very often not been able to encourage people to look at the forward plan and to debate it.
And of course, the timing of meetings to dovetail with the cabinet alongside that.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So, Malcolm.
Yeah, nothing to do with this subject, Chair. It's just that I've got something else at 12, and I'm not sure, Barry, if you're in the same meeting, but
okay.
If you'd release us from that, we'd be grateful.
Right. I shall release you with the comments to reiterate and thank Barry for his words and yours, that overall, the ultimate is to be courteous and polite and to enable people to have the opportunity to have their say. And I'm glad that you found that under Mick's chairmanship and perhaps under others as well. And thank you so much for all the effort that you've put in to help us scrutinise. So you're officially allowed to go.
Thank you very much indeed. Have fun.
Thank you. You too. Thank you.
Thank you, and Barry.
Okay. Yes, sorry, Graham. That was about the forward plan and forward scrutiny. I think we covered that.
And timing, making sure that the diaries fits in with the cabinet, so that the useful scrutiny can be done. Yes,
and I certainly, going back from my experience, it was that process that new initiatives didn't arrive, a month or two before the budget was set. They arrived a long time before, and for there to be an openness from the cabinet or executive to feed that into forward planning scrutiny and allow it to be scrutinised to make for better decisions when it comes. James, I'm looking for James. There you are. Are you happy with the content that you've now got to be able to send off our takeaways from this scrutiny process in the county?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, clearly, I think everybody present at the meeting has had an input. I think this was really intended to be an opportunity to take stock, almost as far as it's possible to do in a relatively short space of time, of the journey that Overview and Scrutiny at NCC has gone through over the past 2.5 years. I think clearly NCC as a whole has been in quite a distinctive position, probably within the world of local government in recent times. But there are things that others can no doubt learn from that. And just in the same way, Overview and Scrutiny at NCC has been in a distinctive position. It's part of the governance process of the council, which has been under the commissioners. The committee has been given a very distinct focus and task to deal with. But just in the same way as for NCC in general, there are points of arising from that, of the experience that this committee has gone through, that are applicable to scrutiny in general, and are transferable to other authorities, whatever their situation, however they seek to do scrutiny. And that was part of the thinking, I think, behind this item. An opportunity for members to say, or to consider, what has changed with overview and scrutiny at NCC in recent times, where it's changed for the better. Why has that been? And clearly, members, I think, in the previous discussion have either highlighted that specifically, or it's been implicit in some of the points that have been raised. And I think, I mean, maybe just something from me to add to what's been said. I think scrutiny can very easily be either a virtuous circle or a vicious circle, and when it can become a vicious circle, I mean, members have highlighted questions about member engagement and member attendance. I think when scrutiny is in a good position, I think you can have a situation where members, where it's making a difference, it's adding something to the effectiveness of the council. And because of that, councillors see the point in being involved in scrutiny, see the good it can do, see why it's worthwhile. And in that situation, that you then have far less, or indeed possibly no, issues with attendance and engagement, because fundamentally members see what scrutiny is there to do, why it's worth getting involved with. The other side of that coin is when you have the vicious circle, where people don't see the point and therefore are less engaged. The challenge is to have the virtuous circle, not the vicious circle. And I'd like to think that over the past 2.5 years, NCC has been overview and scrutiny has been on a learning curve, but has got to the position where it's far closer to the virtuous end of the spectrum than the vicious end of the spectrum, if I could put it in those terms.
Thank you, James, and very much wise words there. Graham, your hand is up. Was that
latent? I'm afraid. Latent
hand. Thank you. So James has those comments to go forward. I think my only particular comments on that are that even given the circumstances of NCC, in every organisation, however bad it looks from the outside, there are always people working incredibly hard, and there are always nuggets of real good practice and things that are going on. And sometimes it's a shame that the overall screens some of that. And just as a final word, I always remember one of the councillors when I first joined at Kettering, who made the point that hindsight is 20/20 vision. And it's always very easy to look back after the event and find what one should have done. And it might be blatantly obvious at that point, but that to learn from those experiences, and everyone in this room today, virtual room, has learned from some of those experiences and will take them on. And I always take, lastly, the American view that when someone in America goes bust, investors want to invest with them because they know what it's like to go bust, and you can't always be doing the right thing, which I think is quite an enlightened way of going forward. Whether it makes people money, I don't know. But James, just before I finally, you've got a comment?
No, Chair, it was about the practicalities. So as with the previous item, clearly there'll be a set of minutes resulting from this meeting. They will contain all of the points that members have raised. does the committee want to do anything more immediate by way of relaying the list of points to each of the new authorities? Does the committee want to do any more than that?
Before the minutes, colleagues, who do we send this to?
I'd suggest, Chair, to the chief executives of the two authorities, given that they're in post. Writing to a member, to an elected member, would of course be subject to the elections and to any decisions about future roles and responsibilities.
No, that's absolutely fine. Chris, you briefly put your hand up, but we'll send this report and information directly to the chief executives in advance of when the minutes are approved. Happy with that? Everyone happy with that one? I should just say, I don't think it's a good idea for councils or any business to go bust. My analogy with America was just a speculation.
So in that case, Chair, could I have could I ask the committee, please, to agree then to delegate authority to the three vice chairs to approve the final version of that, just because it does need to be subject to some approval before it goes.
All agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone, for all those contributions. Very much aware of time moving on. Item 8 is responses to previous overview and scrutiny. And for this item, I hand over, I think, correctly at this point to James.
Thank you, Chair. This is a very brief one. Normally, the committee has a standard report on its work programme, which includes a list of resolutions from previous meetings requiring action and whether they have been actioned or are still outstanding. There is no work programme report to this meeting for obvious reasons. So this report just provides an update on actions relating to previous resolutions. I'm happy to say there is nothing outstanding. Everything has been responded to. I'm happy to take any questions on the report, Chair.
Thank you. Chris Stamborough. Thank you, James.
No question, Chair. I move that we note the report.
All agreed that we note the report?
Yeah.
That's brilliant. And just as a final, thank you, as we've already said, to Mick Scrimshaw. Thanks to Chris Stamborough, Victoria Perry, and also Julie Davenport, who for a period of time was vice chair as well, and to everyone else who went before in terms of achieving some of the results that Scrutiny has. So,
Chairman, I'd like to also thank James Edmonds for all the work he's done on Scrutiny and kept us on the straight and narrow, and more than adequately come up with the right words to express what we've been saying.
Absolutely. I was going to say, all of us find James as a right-hand man when you're sitting there trying to manage a meeting and trying to remember what everyone was saying. So a big thank you to James and Raj and all the other Democratic Services officers over time.
Yeah, Chair, and we should record our thanks to all the Democratic. I mean, James at budget time has worked hours and hours, well over the norm, and I don't think we could have done it without him. But also all the other officers that have come and given their reports and supported over time. It's without their reports, you couldn't do the scrutiny either. So, but particularly we'll note James and some of the others that have obviously left, Ben and Barbell and one or two others. So I think we must record that.
Absolutely, and James, I'm going to leave you to put the words around an item there which does say our greatest appreciation and respect for the work you've done, and also for whatever the future holds, whether you go north, go west, or go somewhere else, but whichever way it is.
Thank you, Chairman, and just to close the circle, thanks to members. It has been a very interesting opportunity to work with the committee from start to finish. To hark back to the previous item, I think it has been a learning process, and I think where the committee has reached, and the committee is obviously principally the members who've made it up, where the committee has reached now compares infinitely favourably with where it was when it started.
Thank you, James. Now, again, these aren't latent hands, I hope. I've got Chris Stamborough and Michael Clark.
Yeah, thanks. Just endorse everything that's just been said, Chair, but also we should acknowledge those members of the public and those professional experts who've come to talk to us over the years. Their contribution's been very welcome and useful too. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. And Michael.
Yes, in the past, Mr. Chairman, I have on occasion referred to James as Northampton County Council's answer to Sir Humphrey Appleby, and I've always meant that in the nicest possible way.
Yes, Minister. So, thank you for that, Michael. So at that particular point, I draw to a close this last meeting of overview and scrutiny for the County Council, and wish everybody, irrespective, and I mean that sincerely, with whatever future plans they have, whether that's being elected and personally taking on some of the lessons we've learned, or in any other aspect of life, electorate depending. So I wish everybody a really good month or two, and let's hope we all break out and can meet in person as well in the not too distant future. So thank you everybody for contributing to this meeting.
Thank you.
I
Thank you.
therefore close it at 12:13.
Well done.
Bye.
All the best.
Well done, folks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Take care. Bye. There we go. Thank you,
All right,
James.
thank you.